And when I do a lot of picture of natural dentition. So when I try to apply that, some really fit it, and some canine will be even narrower than the golden proportion, but most likely they will not. Most likely what will happen is, first of all, lateral to central will be more or less by it, but then canine will get over that. Canines are usually bulkier than the golden proportion. Second thing that you will start to notice when you apply that to natural dentition is that right side and left side are never the same. They're never symmetrical, but they should be in the harmony. So centrals are usually the same unless the nature got really creative with it and did also the centrals a little bit different. And then teeth get wider and wider. So not all the teeth that go in proportion. It's a good tool to use. So we did the mock-up and we put provisionals on, and then patient comes to me and says, you know what, I think my canines should be bulkier. I would like them to be bulkier. And my technician did this amazing wax up, and I did those amazing provisionals, and I just want to say, no, you're stupid. You don't understand how teeth should look like. But then I take a picture, I apply the silly golden proportion, and we know that canine doesn't fit it. They're usually bulkier, but I'm not even near the golden proportion. So yeah, she's right. Whenever a patient tells you that there's something wrong, well, as long as they're adequate enough. So when they tell you there's something wrong, probably it is. They might not use right words to describe it, but if you really try to listen, you will find that, yeah, they're actually right. So, this is another rule. So, central incisors, they should be identical. They should be like identical twins. More than that, central incisors are the most dominant teeth in the arch. It is the widest tooth. It is the widest anatomically. It's wider than canine, and especially it is the widest when you look at teeth being in the arch. And it is the longest tooth in the arch. Even if canine is a little bit longer, first of all, it starts higher, so it's at least the same height or maybe even shorter in the arch. And second of all, its tip is very narrow, and centrals have this broad incisal edge, so it's really dominant. And the rule is that if your central incisors are identical twins, then the more lateral you go from them, the more variation you can have. So then your lateral incisors will be like siblings, so you kind of see that those kids have same mommy and daddy, but they're still different kids. And then you have cousins, and then you have somebody else. So the more lateral you go, the more asymmetry you can afford to have. Proportions of the central incisor can be anywhere starting from 85 to 70, with 80 being voted by studies the most prettier. And I know my preference. Every dentist, every technician has kind of their favorite shape of tooth or their favorite proportion. So this is my favorite proportion. I know Angela plans most of the cases to be at least 75. Sometimes he goes up until 70. This starts to make me feel uncomfortable. I'm a little bit myself uncomfortable with too long teeth. It seems too toothy. But in nature, absolutely, you can have everything. You can have 70, you can have 85. I have 100, and it's not a problem. So my teeth are absolutely square. How much time do we have until? Oh, great. So, this might still seem kind of stupid and obvious because we think we know how the central incisor look like. Reality though, if being suggested to draw one, we might end up looking like something that this drawing looked like. So mentally, we should have some sort of references. It's very good to imagine that your tooth is a box, basically. So the same thing that some of you who are gonna go to the hands-on the day after tomorrow, this is what you're gonna do. So you're gonna do direct mock-up, you're gonna do anterior composite, you're gonna do it 2 or 3 times. And this is how you're gonna go about your anterior teeth. So you do the blobs of composite, and then you go, okay, this is your incisal edge, and this is your mesial contact, and this is your distal contact, and there is your gingiva. Okay, so as soon as you put those, you have a box. So now let's go. Now let's try to figure out the shape of central incisor that is fitting inside the box. So where will you start? You figure out where your midline of the tooth is, what divides it to the mesial and distal part. And for the central incisor, the zenith of the tooth, it's absolutely never quite in the middle of the tooth. So gingival zenith goes a little bit to the distal. After that, and also, it never peaks, right? So you have your zenith, but it never peaks in a sharp way. It's more of a surface contact to that. After that, you're going to figure out where is your end of the mesial papilla and where is your end of a distal papilla. Mesial papilla will be somewhere near the middle of the tooth. In some cases, it will go a little bit higher. Distal papilla should be higher than the mesial one. So then you start going from your zenith and it goes kind of very straight to the tip of papilla on the mesial, and then it's very straight down up until your incisal embrasure, your mesial corner. And the mesial corner of the central incisor, no matter what shape you have, is it triangle, is it rectangle, is it ovoid, it's always be a little bit rounded. It's never sharp unless you have wear, and unless the wear went up until this point. And then you have your incisal edge, and then you have really rounded distal corners, always more round than the mesial one. And then you have your distal wall that always makes the greater curve than the mesial wall did. So straight on the mesial, curvier on the distal. And there you go. This is your basic shape of one of three anterior teeth. It's good to know the average length and width of the teeth when you plan the cases, but again, not everybody will fit. If you try to make a makeover and go from 6 millimeters or go from 7 millimeters to 11.5, you will have a lot of complaints from this patient. Okay, so plan the length kind of logically according to what person is and what they have. Again, just the fact that you have those rules, it doesn't make you lack creativity. You can create whatever shape you would like inside those rules. So you can have it round, you can have it square, you can have a triangle, but all of them follow the same rules. All of them have zenith and a distal. All of them have straighter mesial wall than it is on the distal. All of them have a more sharper mesial corner. It's never sharp than the distal, and the distal can get really curvy. And this is what you're gonna see in the nature. Learn from the nature. This is what I show to my technician all the time, especially when I see rectangular tooth, because he really likes to give me, when I write prescription, I like for this patient to have a rectangle. He makes it just have both sharp corners. And then I take pictures of natural dentition and I show them that even rectangles, they never have sharp corner. But thing about my technician, he's not very brave at cutting edges. He would rather do more, and then maybe I will be okay with that, but maybe I will make him cut it. So I mean, I still struggle with such things, especially when it comes to lateral, and we're gonna get to that a little later. So after you figure out the shape of your central incisor, then you start to move further from it. And the further you go, the more distal and distal your zeniths can get. And this distalization of the zeniths is what gives you this nice undulation of long axis of the tooth. So the central goes a little bit of a mesial ungulation, and then lateral has a little bit more, and then canine is really kind of inside ungulated. The most, not the most, but a lot of cases what I see kinda get ruined by the lateral incisor, which usually starts to be poking out, and this is what we saw at the last year's practical course as well. So we think it might seem, so this is so basic, this is what we learned in university, and we know that. But as soon as we apply those skills, somehow all our laterals start to be like this. And it's very easy for technicians also to make a lateral look like that. So you put your zenith to the distal, and there you have your angulation. And as soon as you figure out the angulation of the canine, it's really easy to go from there on, because first premolar will continue the shape of the canine, and the second premolar will continue the shape of your first premolar. Line angles, very important, and we know that, or we think that we know that, but again, Angela, last year Angelo did this part of like morphology part of the lecture, so he had a similar slide with showing how the line angles go, and then I took a picture of that, and then we did the hands-on, and I had to go with this picture and show it to practically everybody, because we start to put line angles in the teeth when we do direct composite, and then somehow they end up meeting in the middle of the tooth, or somehow they start going apart, or somehow they start to go parallel. So line angles of the teeth going from central more laterally, these are not, they're never parallel, but they would meet, if they would go into the gingiva, they would meet somewhere really high, and then you go to the lateral, and then they're meeting somewhere closer to the gingival margin, and then you go to the canine, and then they meet really close to the gingival margin. And this is, the way that we work with my dental technician, we check each other. So he checks all my preparations, he gives me feedback on them, and I check all his wax up, and especially when I put them in. So, check in the line angles, how do they go, where do they meet? I put provisionals in, again, are the line angles okay? What line angles should never do is meet somewhere, you have this curve that the mesial one meets the distal one. And weirdly enough, this is exactly what I learned in university, for example. This is exactly how we were taught to do anterior teeth. So never meeting, always going inside the gingiva. It gives this very natural kind of emerging from the gingiva look. And especially when you finish, it's very easy to do, especially when you finish your margin in the enamel, it still has the outline of all the line angles, of all the curves of the tooth. So it's really easy for technician to actually put them in there, make them go inside the gingiva, if he just thinks about it a little bit, and if we just think about it a little bit. Another rule about line angle, the mesial one is always more straight than the distal. In whatever shape of tooth you take, the distal will always make a bigger curve than the mesial line angle. So, line angles is about the angle in between two planes, where two planes meet. And line angle is the meeting point of the proximal surface with the facial surface, right? So when we talk about line angles, very important to have a look at your tooth from incisal direction. Again, more straight, curvier. And when you look from incisor, from the incisal direction, you will see that mesial line angle is always a sharper angle than it is on the distal, just like the incisal, mesial and distal angles were. And this what gives you, so in the natural dentition, this is the natural tooth and this is the single veneer that we made. Exactly the same. It's never sharp, it's rounded, but it's very little radius of a circle. So mesial line angle and the distal line angle is very curvy. It gives you those nice light reflections on the mesial that goes kind of sharply and straightly from the gingiva to the mesial corner, and then distally it all kind of smoothen out. And whatever shape of tooth you take, when you take a round shape of the tooth, of course, even mesial line angle will be a little bit curvy, but the distal will be even curvier. And then you go to a square, and again, you can have it exactly straight, and this will curve. And on the triangle shape, the mesial line angle can actually go not on the incisal edge, but can actually go out into this point of the corner. It kind of widens out your incisal edge and makes your tooth look a little bit wider. Especially it helps if you have really long teeth, not to make them even longer, so you kind of widen them out. the facial plane of the tooth, when you look from the incisor, when you take different shape of teeth in between those line angles, the round teeth will have the biggest curve in the middle, or they will be almost flat but not quite flat. And yet still, this will be a little sharper than that, although it's all really smooth. Square teeth will have more or less flat surface in between those line angles. And for some triangle teeth, you can really see how the line angles form those ridges, and then in between them you have this nice concavity. And it's very nice to see that in the natural dentition. So here you have a concavity on the mesial, distal is all kind of round, and this has a very nice concavity in the middle, although she's in her late 20s. The surface anatomy is kind of smooth out, and these have this very nice round shape with the biggest curve in the middle of the tooth. Now, surface morphology, those concavities that you have, there is a really good reason why none of them is mentioned in any good technical book about surface and the tooth morphology for technicians. So I opened quite a bit of those books that I have. All of them mention them, but none of them gives you rules, because somehow we learned this rule, that on the central incisor you have two concavities. One is very sharp and very narrow, and the distal one is very broad and shorter. And it's nice. It is indeed what you will probably mostly have, but what it usually ends up being in direct composite is you can just see the depression of the burr, right? In the mesial, it's going to be this line, and on the distal, it's going to be a little bit like line, right? So we concentrate too much on the concavity itself and creating it with the burr, but in fact, the final result will be, we don't see the concavity. What we actually see is the light reflection that is around it. Okay, so once we polish it, we will have light reflection on the curvy surfaces of the tooth. And this is what we should think of. And nature is wonderful. Sometimes it does that, but it can have a lot of different options. And what I find helpful is whenever I get patients with amazing natural teeth, I don't like to have them a lot in my practice because it kind of, ruins my day a little bit. Now I have to do a checkup, to do a little bit of a cleaning, but a lot of them have really nice teeth, and this is something that I really can use. So I photograph them a lot. I take impression. Of course I don't make them pay for the impressions, but I take silicone impressions with two models. One goes to me and one goes to dental technician. So you can, of course, order the Jan Haito set of models, right? He has the natural dentition. You can have his book, which is very good book, but you can also collect all this data yourself. You have a lot of patients who has beautiful natural teeth. So I find it very helpful to have this model, and whenever I have to do this surface anatomy after I did the direct filling, which actually I really do. So I take the model and I kind of try to copy what nature did. And then next time I will take another model. I try to copy something else. And this was also one of the assignments that we did on the course for technicians. So we were doing waxing. We waxed a tooth that was a round tooth, a big round tooth. And then using just line angles, you had to make it a square tooth. And then using just line angles, you had to make it a triangle tooth. So it's really helps to understand how having the same frame and putting line angles in a different position, different curves, you can really change the shape of tooth. And then you ended up with a triangle shape, and he gives you a random model of round shaped teeth and says, copy this surface anatomy on your tooth. And then you really go like, okay, teeth might look different, but they might have still same surface anatomy. So one great way to learn about how teeth look like is to look at them, to study those natural dentitions. Another great way to learn how they look and painful way to learn how they look are those cases. Oh, it's a pain in the ass, those cases. So, initially, so this will be the shape that that we should copy with technician. Beautiful shape, absolutely beautiful. No wear, a little bit of a chip. So initially he came to me with dislodged PFM. So he kind of came in the office like, this is my crown. And also it's ugly, so if it's possible, I would like to have it nicer. I didn't have time for anything at all. I didn't have time for core build-up or provisional. So what do? You take this crown. And I mean, obviously it's dislodged because there's no shape of no shape of resistance whatsoever, right? You push a little bit from the palate and it comes off. So, what I ended up having is, I don't even remember if I cleaned it or not, but I took a glass ionomer cement, I plunked it on, and for next visit he comes and I cannot remove that for my life. So I ended up cutting through all this incisor metal all the way to his tooth structure. Okay, so we remove that, even though I'm planning to do, it's fine. Even though I'm planning to do an adhesive crown next, so he's young, his teeth are bright, I'm not going to do zirconia for him, I'm not going to do a PFM for him. So I'm planning to do adhesive work on him, but still I don't like the shape of this abutment tooth. I would like to have it, for it to have a little bit more form of resistance. So what I ended up doing is kept the access cavity for the, I apologize for that. There you go. There you go. Okay, so his tooth was a little bit discolored. Not much, it could be handled just with ceramics, but his teeth are so bright that I didn't want to use opaque ceramics and block it. So what I ended up doing is one-time internal bleaching on the tooth to make it the base brighter, but then still I did core build-up, provisional, but then for a single anterior tooth, that will really make you communicate your shades taken really well for your technician, unless you can send your patient to go and see a technician yourself, but my technician doesn't have time for that. My technician sits in the lab sometimes until midnight, sometimes he sleeps in there, because I work exclusively with him, but he works exclusively with all the other dentists who wants to order from him, so he ends up having too much work. So I do that for him. Stamp shade, so we ended up doing bleach and we got quite a good shade, but would you entirely rely on that? Maybe not. Link very likes to talk about the effects of internal bleaching, maybe he will mention that after. So I ended up having still quite an aggressive preparation, because in case his tooth gets a bit of a relapse, and it's not going to be a big relapse because we didn't start with the very dark shade, even if it goes halfway back, it's not going to be a big problem as long as I still have enough of enamel. So it's not going to be a 0.1, it's going to be more of 0.4, 0.5 at the margin. Okay, so we do this is the first try-in. The most important thing to match is the value. Okay, this is how you check the value. So the value is okay, the tooth have the same brightness, and as soon as you have the same brightness of teeth, the correction of the chroma is really just a matter of one stroke with the pencil on the surface, and there you go, there you have it. So, but value is a bitch. Sometimes I end up having 4 try-ins for single tooth that I could have done directly, but I chose to do indirect, and then I have a tooth that is too dark, we try to correct that, and now it's too bright, and then we go back to too dark, and then we match it, and then chroma is a bit off, so my technician does this one stroke of the pencil, and there we go. So I wanted to have a little bit more chroma, a little more of those yellow spots, and this is the final work, which I thought could be painted a little bit braver, so I figured it could use a little bit more yellow, to what my patient said that you're a cuckoo and you really need to chill out. So I did. And this is where we ended. No rubber dam. I'm very much rubber dam freak, so I use it all the time. But lately I've realized that, well, rubber dam is the tool to control the moisture, and there are other ways to control the moisture. For some cases, for him, I would put the rubber dam on, but the cementation point will kind of squeeze in between other patients. So, to waste all the time to put the rubber dam on, no. Anyway, it went in. And there's this shape, which is very interesting, because not only you have to do a single, not only you have to create a beautiful shape, you have to create an aged shape, which usually ends up. So doesn't matter that his corner is now kind of sharp. This is also sharp. They're still a little bit rounded, but look, still mesial goes very straight, and the distal is still curvy, even though the shape of his teeth was probably initially rectangle. Does this preparation look too excessive to you? Does it affect too much? I thought so too. So this is how it usually ends up with when you want to have aged teeth. Technician just makes them shorter, so now it's young little tooth instead of being long tooth that have had a wear during its lifetime. So, I mean, the value was so much off. It's very easy to mask the value on the pictures when you take them with the giant flash, especially put soft boxes on. And a lot of cases where I see that they try to match the dark tooth to other teeth, they make one crown. It ends up looking kind of good on the picture, but then you know it's probably worse in life, because this crown looks very good, judging the value right now, but when you're on a social distance with the person during the try and it takes just one glimpse, just, nope, that's bad. And then the second one comes in, nope, that's even worse. And so this is really where we have the most struggle. It's really choosing the right ingot and the right layering ceramics. So, and this is the next one, and this is good. So he overbuilt it and then he grinded it. So that's what makes it look good. All right, cementation, rubber dam for him. Look how flat it is. I don't care if it's round or if it's flat or if it's concave, as long as it matches exactly the shape of this tooth. All right, so he ended up quite happy. He loves me so much because of that tooth. He sent me 2 of his friends to do a single anterior veneer case. So he loves me, I kind of hate him for that now. Time goes on, the tooth went for endodontic treatment. My dead tooth count is 3 for now, in 6 years of working, where I prepped the tooth and it ended up having endodontic treatment shortly after. For one case, I know that was my mistake. I know I over-prepped the tooth on the mesial. For this case, it was very hard to work with him. So his tooth was vital, but it was vital in the way that I had to do anesthesia every 20 minutes. So I do a full ampoule of anesthesia, 20 minutes later, she says, I'm sore. So imagine all those 4 try-ins that we did. It was kind of horrible. I was in the lab, because we were doing it in the lab, in the mouth, all the painting, and I was with the shot of anesthesia trying to kind of make him not sore. So although I have this feeling like, hey, this is still the vital tooth, and I would hate to kill it, actually, I should have killed it, right? Because it ended up having endodontic treatment and abscess either way. All right, we're going for the break now, and then we're gonna